Does it have does it have a steering wheel? Does it have a gas pedal? Does it have a brake? Does it have a gear shift? How many people would not drive the car if it had no steering wheel? How many people would say, driving a car without a steering wheel doesn't make any sense to me? Okay? So that's one of the reasons people think investing is risky, is they don't have these controls. So the way you look at it is, here I come up to the car, I look it over, I climb in, if we can get into this thing. Ugh. So I'm driving down the road, in control, in control. I have a gas pedal, boom, 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 and a brake. And the brake, I go forward, stop. How many people have ever driven a car without brakes? How many of you found it an exciting experience? I have. Like this. And you have a gear shift over here because it's go forward or you go back. And all of these things give you control. So those are the 4 basic controls, and there's 2 more controls you've got to have. One of them is you got to have a driver's license, which proves you took driver's ed, you passed the test. And the last control is proof of insurance. So if, let's say, you're driving down the road, having a good time and all this, and all of a sudden you hear, ding, 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 ding. The policeman comes up to the car, and being a good policeman, what's the first thing they ask you for? Driver's license and proof of insurance. So those are the 6 basic controls you got to have. Now, what happens to most people, because they don't have education, or in their investments, they're driving down the road, in mutual funds, and there's no brakes, there's no. Because people in savings, stocks, bonds, mutual funds have absolutely no control. And that's why they think investing is risky. So you're driving down the road like this, going, whoa, whoa. And the worst thing about it is this, is your financial advisor. Do they have any control? No. You see, your financial advisor or the big company they work for, let's say it's XYZ Investment Banking Company, they have no control either. So they're telling you to diversify, to invest for the long term and all this, because they're driving down the road like this. And what it really looks like is this. Your financial advisor is this. Oh, I tell you what, I can't see the marketplace, but I tell you, stocks should go up, and the third quarter should be a little bit better. And this is what most financial advisors are telling you. Why? Because they have no control. And the reason they tell you to diversify is to protect them, because they have no control, and neither do you. Does that make sense, you guys here? And so as a professional investor, as a active investor, the number one thing is control. Got it? So let me see if I can get out of this wreck now. Jesus. Oh, my goodness. Oh. Yeah. I broke the car. Oh. When you have no control, what a professional investor is looking for, there's 6 things. 6 things in driving a car, 6 things as an investor. First is income. I want to control income. Second is expenses. 3, asset value. 4, liability. 5, financial education or the management. Do you realize, and 6 is insurance. Do you realize most people cannot call the mutual fund manager and say, I don't like what you're doing? Do you realize most people cannot call Bill Gates, the CEO of Microsoft, and say, I don't like the way you're managing their expenses of a company? What's this new jet? Why'd you hire that worthless CEO? Why don't you hire somebody else? And the reason, so what a professional investor is looking for is control of these things. Number 1, income. 2, expenses. 3, asset value. 4, liability or debt. And you surround this whole thing is you want good financial education, or you want management, and you want insurance here. Those are the 6 basic controls as an investor. Let me give you an example. Let's say I buy a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, and I want to increase its income. One thing I can do is I might be able to borrow a little bit of money, add a third bedroom and a second bath or a third bath onto it, and what that does is increase my cash flow. That's an example of improving or taking control of this thing. If I call Bill Gates, like I said, and I say, Bill, I don't like that new jet you bought, what's he going to say to me? So what? Or I call my financial mutual fund guy, the man, like a Peter Lynch or something like this. They're not going to take my phone call. They don't have to tell me any controls here. So these are the 6 controls an investor must have. And that's what makes the very, very low risk. One last point I'll bring up, and then I'll bring Kenny and Garrett up here about insurance and all this, is that let's say this is 10 acres of land. What the value of a property is when I look at this here depends upon who I am professionally. Let's say I'm a farmer. That's my profession. I look at that 10 acres of land, and what I'll say is that thing is only worth $10,000 an acre to me. But if I look at it the way Kenny looks at it as a real estate developer, that same 10 acres may be worth $1 million to me. And that's what I mean by control, is that by looking at it from different points of view, that's how I make my money. So that's the same way when I saw those 10 acres in Bisbee, Arizona, they wanted $100,000 for it. You know, I said, what's the thing worth? It's not worth much as land, but it's worth $1.5 million as a manufactured housing type of thing. So this is how I have control. And that's, as an active investor, is what I'm going for. If I don't have controls of these things, I don't invest. So with that, Kenny, will you come up here and then talk about, as a professional investor, what you look for and what controls you want? Let's a big hand for Kenny here. Thank you.
Well, I think Robert touched on it a little bit. The first thing that we look for are problems, to be quite honest. We look for people who are poor managers or people who aren't seeing opportunities that we might see just through our day-to-day financial education. And I'll just give you a couple examples of that. Robert and Kim and I bought a building in the Biltmore area here in Phoenix just 1 year ago. And it was a small property with 68 units. And it's not far from Highland in the 24th area, in the Esplanade area there.
It's close to where Donald Trump is building his new building. Okay? So
right, and it had all the things that we wanted. It had really poor management, really bad income, and really high expenses. But it was very well located. It was a very nice property. What had happened was the owner was absentee. In other words, he was treating the property like an investment instead of a business, because really real estate is a business. If you don't have the proper team around it, it will go down in value. So this investor lived in Mexico and hadn't been to the property in a long time and had been through many different management companies, and the property had had a very poor history of occupancy. So what we were looking for was the opportunity piece. In other words, it had really low income and really high expenses. And the reason it had low income was because the management had not followed the systems. They had put poor tenants in, people that weren't paying rent, etc. And the reason it had high expenses was because of the low occupancy, they were having to spend money on the advertising and things like that happen when your occupancy's low. So what we did is we just put a better plan on it. That's all. So when we bought the property, Robert and I, we both immediately knew we wanted it because the property had been running at 68% occupancy, and the expenses were high. So what we did is we put the property into escrow, and we had the whole plan on the property before we were going to buy it. So I knew exactly what our plan was to turn the property into a profitable real estate venture before we closed it. And I knew everything about it through the process of which is called due diligence, which to me is one of the most important things that you can do before you buy any piece of property.
And this is Kenny's product that he did with me, and I think if you're going to be a professional investor, I think this is essential for your library. It's called How to Increase Your Investment from Your Real Estate Investments. And inside of it, I think this is what makes it priceless. It's what Kenny calls his due diligence checklist. because Kenny and Kim and I are not flippers. We're not trying to buy something to flip it. These are all the checklists. When you inspect a property, you go through it. Say, this is what it needs, this is what it needs, does it have it, doesn't have it. And where most people become afraid, this is worth tens of thousands, maybe millions of dollars, because it is really the inspection of the building that either makes it profitable or not profitable. And this is really what you need in the whole thing. So Kenny's been very generous to giving all the actual forms he uses, checklists he goes through. Because most people are trying to buy, exactly as Buffett says, they're trying to buy because the prices are going up. That's gambling. That's capital gains. What we're looking for is solid value, the way Buffett looks at it. And it can only be done through a due diligence checklist. And it's not here right now, but there's also 4 audio cassettes that you can listen to and actually walk you through how this is used here. So this is essential for anybody who wants to invest in real estate, how to analyze a property. The interesting thing that Kenny says, when most people look at these, go through the diligence checklist, and they see horrible problems, they back off. But the reason we make so much money is because there are problems, right?
Well, we buy properties with 20, 30, 40% vacancy. That's where I look to buy. If I don't want to buy a property that is really highly occupied and has their rents at market, because to me there's very small opportunity for value growth, which is what we look for.
Right. So this is a very important product, and if you're interested, buy it. If you're not interested, don't buy it. But this is what really makes you rich. That's why it's such an important product. And the thing about this is, the gentleman asked me during the break, how do you find great investments in this hot market? Well, this is the hottest market of all. Like I said, you can walk to Trump's new building from the building we bought. It was sitting there. Nobody wanted it because it had low income, high expenses, and all this. And the first thing that Kenny did was renegotiate the mortgage, got the lower interest rate on it. And all these things, that's where you make your money. You're not buying it to flip a property. That's gambling.
As a matter of fact, we received an offer unsolicited. We didn't list the property. We bought the property for $4.6 million, and we received an offer 1 year later for $7 million. And we turned it down because we're not in the business of flipping property. We're in the business of long-term hold and cash flow. So we still own the property today.
Right. And like I said, Trump is building right down the street, and this is the hottest market of all. So this is how you find great investments, is you have to do your due diligence on a project. Right?
Well, the due diligence basically builds the plan for the whole property and building your wealth.
Okay. Big hand for Kenny. Thank you very much. All right, Garrett's coming up here. What Kenny is talking about here is management, which takes a little financial education. So Garrett's going to come up and talk a little bit about insurance, and insurance via the corporate asset protection.
Well, let me take a little informal poll right here. How many people have been sued? Let's be honest. How many people in the room have been sued? All right. How many people haven't been sued yet? All right. How many people think we live in a litigious society? And how many people would say there are a few attorneys out there without enough to do? Right? It's true. We live in a highly litigious society, and you need to take steps to protect your assets. And there are 2 forms for accomplishing that. One is insurance. When you buy an asset, like Robert says, he doesn't buy an asset unless he's got insurance on it. When you buy a piece of real estate, you're going to insure it. But what's the problem with insurance these days? Do insurance companies find reasons not to cover you? Yes. Do they get up and leave the state like they do every 5 years in California? Yes. So you need to take other steps to protect your real estate and your other assets. You need another form of insurance, which are entities. And that's what I wrote about in Own Your Own Corporation, is how to use these entities, the good entities, S corporations, C corporations, limited liability companies, and limited partnerships to protect your assets.
What Garrett's saying, if you're going to be rich, there's no sense not insuring it. Does that make sense, you guys here? Well, a lot of people want to get rich, but they want to save a few bucks and not hire a person like Garrett to protect their assets from lawsuits. And I've seen that happen a lot of times. And the one thing they say about insurance, you cannot buy insurance when you need it. Like this car wreck over here. After I crash my car, I can't call my insurance agent and say, would you insure my car? You must buy insurance prior to the wreck. That's the rule of thumb here, okay?
Yeah, you can't form a corporation or an LLC to protect your real estate once you've been sued. It's too late at that point. So you need to take steps right at the start. When you're looking for that first piece of property, you need to take steps to protect it using the right entity.
So can I say something about that? As my poor dad always said, he was really proud of it, and this is a poor man's thinking. My house is in my name. My car is in my name. How many people have things in your name? Okay, that's poor person's thinking. You want nothing in your name if you're planning on being rich. If you're planning on being poor, keep it in your name because nobody's going to bother you.
Well, and the attorneys can take it from you.
Right.
So, sure, leave it exposed. But if you plan to be rich, if you plan to pass these assets on to your kids or your charities, you need to set up the right entities at the start.
That's their own corporations. So what are the worst, what are the worst corporations or worst entities?
Well, the worst entity, I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. The bad entity is a sole proprietorship. Offers no asset protection at all. If you operate a business as a sole proprietor.
And do a lot of accountants recommend people be sole proprietors?
Yeah, they do. I don't know why.
Well,
they don't understand the nature of our legal system, whereby if you operate as a sole proprietor, you're completely exposed.
And the reason accountants do that is because a lot of them aren't rich, and they're not planning on being rich either. They're basically workers.
Well, a lot of accountants, with all due respect to Sharon Lechter, a lot of accountants will ask, how much money are you making in your business? And if you're only making $10,000 or $20,000, they'll say you don't need to incorporate. But that's the wrong question to ask. They need to ask, how much do you have to protect? You have a house, you have a bank account, you have other assets. You want to protect those assets from business claims that can come your way. If you operate as a sole proprietorship, all those assets are exposed.
Okay. So the worst is a sole proprietorship. What's the second worst?
Well, the worst is a general partnership, because that's liability times two. Not only in a general partnership are you responsible for your own mistakes, but you're responsible for your partner's mistakes. You may not have agreed to a contract. You may have been 1,000 miles away when that contract was signed. And yet, as a general partner, you are equally responsible for everything that happens in that general partnership business.
Good. So how much does it cost me to employ you to write me a, well, first of all, why do you recommend Nevada and Wyoming?
Well, Nevada and Wyoming have very favorable asset protection laws. The LLC laws in both states provide great asset protection for individuals. And it's explained in the book, but basically it's the charging order procedure that gives you a great deal of protection. As well, in Nevada and Wyoming, there's no state tax. They offer a great deal of privacy, and there's no information sharing with the IRS, which can be of benefit to some people.
Right. There's no information sharing. You want to look me up, they won't tell you who owns the corporation.
Right.
Which is good. And then most people recommend Delaware. Why don't you recommend Delaware?
Well, Delaware has some extra fees. You have to do some additional reporting, whereas Nevada and Wyoming, it's much more streamlined. There's less requirements with one of those types of corporations, Nevada and Delaware. Delaware is great for the Fortune 500 company that wants a body of corporate law, a well-established court system. But for the majority of people who are protecting their assets, they're going to use Nevada or Wyoming.
And so how much does it cost to hire a great attorney like you to set up a, let's say, an LLC for me?
Well, Robert, that's one of the things that's interesting. This is not expensive. It is only $695 plus the state filing fees to set up a corporation anywhere in the U.S. So it's not expensive. If you go to an attorney and they say it's going to be $2,000 to $5,000 to set up an entity, shop elsewhere, because it's not expensive. You can do this and consider it like insurance. It's just a payment you'll make, a low annual payment to make to protect your assets.
And the other question is this, is that you have to update it every year, or you have to have a meeting every year. How much does that cost to do that?
Well, we charge a flat fee of $150 to prepare the minutes. You can do it yourself. The problem is a lot of people don't. So for $150 a year, your corporate books are kept in shape, and you're not going to have a problem with someone trying to pierce the corporate veil and go after your personal assets.
So after this, let's say $700, it costs you $150 after that. That's really, really good insurance, because as Garrett says, you can't buy insurance after you're sued. And they can come and take everything you want after that. So my wife and I have multiple S and LLCs and Cs.
You've done a good job.
Yeah, they can hit one, they can't take it all, which is what we want. And without mentioning names, is the last thing, is there somebody peddling something that you think is really wacko?
Well, there's a fellow out there that's peddling limited partnerships as the be-all, end-all, and he gives 100% guarantee of asset protection. And in all good conscience, you cannot make a 100% guarantee on this. Yes, you can protect yourself. Yes, you can be better off using a corporation or an LLC than by going it alone. But no one can give 100% asset protection guarantee.
So, anyway, let's have a big hand for Garrett. I think
Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least for this thing, I know it may sound like a lot to you, taking control. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to fix toilets. I don't want to do this. So you don't ever take control. On our investments, Kim and I do not fix toilets because these hands were not made for work, you know what I mean? So anyway, with that. So I want to bring up Kim, and she wants to speak to the women and how to start. And this is, all part of how you get started. And this is my sweetheart, Kim. Let's have a big hand for her, please. And I know she didn't marry me for my money because over 20 years ago when we met, I was flat broke because I lost another company and all this. And she was one of the few women with the beauty and the brains, but she had backbone to, to put up with all we went through to build our fortunes again. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Robert and I just celebrated our 19th wedding anniversary. We've been together 22 years. And
I did good, huh? I did good.
we both did good. We both did good. But I've got to say, it definitely has not been boring. And actually, Robert talked about how much debt he was in. I didn't understand good debt or bad debt at that time, but we actually celebrated when we hit zero. We popped the champagne on that one. But Robert's talking a lot about control, and my concern is that there's so many women out there today that feel out of control when it comes to money and when it comes to their financial futures. And I am a huge proponent of women getting involved in the world of investing. And more importantly, my passion is really to encourage and educate women to take control of their financial lives and ultimately to become financially independent. Because there's a lot of women I see every day who are depending on somebody else, be it a man, be it a family, a company, or a government, to take care of them financially. And times have changed.
Why don't you tell them the story of your mom and all that and why you were so adamant about it?
Yeah, well, what drives me, what Robert's talking about, is there was an incident that happened when I was very young. And I was 14 years old, and I came home from school one day, and I walked in, and my mom and her best friend were in the dining room. And I kind of heard them talking, and I walked over there, and I could see that my mom's friend was really upset, and she was crying, and my mom kind of, signaled me to, just leave us alone. And so I went away, but I didn't go too far, and was listening to this conversation. And the gist of the conversation is my mom's best friend's, her husband was leaving her for a younger woman. And she was distraught, she was crying, she was upset. She's like, I can't believe this is happening. And I kept listening, and then I heard her say something that just really struck me. And my mom had asked, did you realize what was happening? And she said, my marriage has not been good for many, many years, but I stayed because at least I was taken care of financially. She said, I was too concerned that if I left, I didn't know how to take care of myself. And I was 14 years old, and I heard that, and I went, wow. I'm like, here's this woman, she's in a terrible marriage, she's miserable, yet the only reason she stays is because financially she doesn't know how to take care of herself. So at 14, I made the decision I was never going to be dependent on somebody else for my financial future. And that's why I speak out to women, because I think women today, it's no longer a luxury or just a good idea. I think it's really a necessity that we start to take control of our financial lives. Would you agree?
Right.
Thank you.
So if I could say, because we had Kim follow Garrett, is Kim has her own corporations. We don't have a prenuptial agreement and all that, because if I horse around and it's gone, she doesn't have to worry. There's no fighting. She owns her own corporations, her own assets, her own bank account. She's gone. It's split already. And the reason we do that is just to cut this dependency stuff out. Right? We just